Thank you. I want to just share with you a slogan of my seminary, which I think is very important. And what it is, it says, never instead of, always in addition to. So everything we're saying is in addition to what everybody else has talked about. I want to go back. I was put on a statewide reentry task force under the Patterson administration. And I was put on that task force as a service provider who had operated for over 25 years with other service providers you may have heard of, the Fortune Society, Bronx Defenders, and I'll go back to that. But I would like to talk about how we got to what we did and the knowledge we got along the way. So in 1975, I started a job training program, and you could pass out the information on that. Now, I want to say this. We're going to give you a lot of handouts. Don't stop and study them now. You can take them home. They're going to be put on the website so that people who missed what we're handing out can get it. In 1975, this was before the crack epidemic hit, and we started training women who were on welfare and men getting sober on the Bowery in New York City to be carpenters, electricians, and plumbers. And, that's really, I have to say something that's very important. Everything I have done, or the program name, is not me or the program. The thing was to empower people so they could do it, so they could take a hold, so they could take a hold of their lives and do and live a full and beautiful life. So let's start out with the job training program. The second page shows a woman who came off welfare, Maxine. She was the first carpenter in the Metropolitan Opera House. On the next page, on the opposite side, is the New York Post. She was the first woman plumber from the Latino community. And so on. We have electricians, carpenters, plumbers, bricklayers, women on the waterfront. What was very important is in those years, that's before the crack epidemic hit the poor community. And crack affected women and children like no other drug had, because it was extremely cheap. I remember women talking and saying, oh, it helps me not eat as much. I can lose weight. And it really led into terrible trouble, where a mother wouldn't necessarily think of putting a needle in her arm, but sitting at the kitchen table and a $5 crack cigarette didn't mean anything. And this is really what started, what I saw, led the community into serious, serious problems. Now, I would say the All Craft Center came out of a program before that called Lady Carpenter, where I had taught women who had means to do home improvement. It was a college credit course for the new school. And when people came to me and said, we want to get jobs for women, that's when I formed the All Craft Center, and we were the CETA program. Now, there's something very important about that program. Recently in the Capital Region, when the stimulus money hit, I was part of a faith-based community organizing effort called Arise. And we went around and talked to all the people that were getting the stimulus money. And they said something that really interests me. They said, well, we can't find anybody who has the skills. And I knew exactly what the problem was. In the years that I did the job training program, we had the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act. What that did was fund neighborhood not-for-profits that could give wraparound services for any of the issues that people were facing. What Pataki did was get rid of that and started the one-stop shops where employers ran it. So now if you go to get a job, if you don't have your act together and you can't be there on time and you have any real problems, that's not what an employer wants to hear. An employer wants to hear, when you've solved all those problems and you can be on time, that's when we will work with you. So right there, I began to see the need for community programs again that were in the community, in the hood, and would accept any issues and have child care centers along with the job training, because that's what we did, and that's why it was successful. We did move to get our graduates into the unions. We got the first women into the unions. It was an enormous struggle. And there again is something that has to be worked on. Many of us are very pro-union. We know that unions are good for people, but the unions have been very discriminatory. Not all. Sometimes if you have people in a building trade union who's done time, they can get somebody else in. But most of my participants later on could not get in the union. We did a lot of advocacy. We actually sued all the unions to get women and Black and Latino men in. We were co-plaintiffs with Attorney General Robert Abrams. His way of working on that was to sue the Office of Federal Contract Compliance, who had to make sure that women and minorities were hired in these contracts. Now, I will say all along, we were dealing with people in reentry. I didn't necessarily make that the focus. We were just helping people with the skills and the support. And you might, did you hand out the second one where we had, and that was quite a success. But again, what happened to people was the amount of drugs on the street and the problem of addiction. That's what started to upset a lot of things that were successful and working. It became clear to me that we had to have a support system for anybody we trained to be able to have a life that was alcohol and drug free, because the job training, learning skills, using power tools just didn't mix in with using alcohol and drugs. So we had AA meetings, but we invited, people came to me and said that Narcotics Anonymous was trying to come in from California, and they couldn't find a home in New York City. So actually, we were the first home for Narcotics Anonymous in New York City. You could hand out that next one. We ended up with over 100 meetings a week. We were open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We were the place, if you got out of prison and you wanted to stay alcohol and drug free and your family was still in trouble, your neighborhood was in trouble, your friends were in trouble, you came to St. Mark's. And to this day, there are people coming out of prison who still talk about St. Mark's. You know about St. Mark's. And the reason I say that, it's the people. What we did was empower the people. We made sure we were there for the people. They did it. Those were the years, by the way, that if you were a drug addict, you couldn't detox. You either had to be alcoholic or you had to say you were suicidal. And that's what people would lie. They'll say, oh, well, I'm really an alcoholic, or I'm going to commit suicide. We had no drug detoxes then. We began to see all these people that had no place to go. They were on the street. So we worked with the New York City Human Resources Administration, and we started a church and synagogue shelter. No funding. All we got was food, and they gave us some cots. And we used to get a lot of food, too. City Harvest would go around to the restaurants and pick up food and bring it to us when they were throwing good food out. We housed over 15,000 young homeless, chemically dependent people. Task worked with us a lot. Task would go in and say to a judge, well, this person shouldn't be in upstate in prison, they should be in drug treatment. But then if they had to wait for a bed, where did they go? So that was not particularly successful until we held everybody, and we didn't lose anybody. Why didn't we lose anybody? Because the people, again, who were coming to the meetings, and some people had 2 years clean, 5 years clean, 10 years clean, were employed. They helped these beginners. And we had the meetings round the clock, so they had a place to be. We would have them in meetings 10 hours a day. we seldom lost anybody. It was extremely effective. Okay. I just want to add one thing that, as I talk about this quickly, you know, we've had to wait until we've had prevention, intervention, and suppression. Our society has operated with suppression. We haven't done much on prevention or intervention. There are some plans now for some new mental health diagnoses that should be out in the DSM handbook in 2013 that would give a judge a chance to, before there's a crisis, there'll be many mental health definitions that we could look at that a judge could hang their hat on to keep somebody out of prison. And I just think that's something, I wanted to mention it because it should be looked at. Okay. Just let me check. I am going to give this over to, I wanted to include youth because the judge who was supposed to speak was going to talk about youth in jail. One of the big areas that happened at St. Mark's were teenagers who were being orphaned because of parental addiction and subsequent HIV. There's an article we're handing out to you. In those years, it was 50,000 children on the streets of New York City whose parents had been teenage parents and shot drugs after the children were born. Their parents were dying, they didn't have AIDS. So they didn't get attention from the AIDS community, okay? And they had nobody. And in addition to that, they were going through extremely hard time, and there was a great deal of sexual abuse of kids on the street. I didn't plan to, but ended up, I housed about 50 kids over 10 years and took legal custody of a lot of them. They did a wonderful job in helping each other and helping themselves. And so our next speaker is going to speak about that whole experience. She was, how old when I first met you? 13 years old. She's now a dignified mother of 3 with a son who just graduated from high school, and she's in college. Sherry.
Hi, my name is Sarita Sotomayor, also known as Sherry. In my opinion, most misguided adolescents turn to the streets and end up incarcerated because they have nowhere to turn or no one to turn to when they're dealing with life's crisis. Born in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, where at that time drugs, alcohol, and AIDS had invaded our lives, but speaking out would be violating or degrading our families. An abusive alcoholic father who passed away when I was 5, and a mother with a chemical dependency who hid that part of herself from me and my sister. It wasn't until I began attending ATA Allcraft that I became aware of these issues. I was introduced to Allcraft through a close friend. At Allcraft, I attended ATA meetings, Addicted Teen Anonymous. ATA was founded when a bunch of inner city kids attended an Al-Anon meeting and we were thrown out. Reverend Joyce Hartwell knew how imperative it was for us to be able to address our emotions. She requested permission from the World Service Office to organize ATA and provide therapeutic support to us teenagers. We would meet daily to discuss various topics, following a 12-step guideline, which is the paper that was just handed out. For an example, on Mondays, we would discuss recovery from addiction to chemicals, and someone would have spoken on misusing alcohol and drugs to hide their feelings and cope with their situations. Tuesday, recovery from addiction to misusing sex and relationships. We have one teenager who wasn't raised by parents, spoke on how she used her body to fulfill the love she wasn't receiving from them. On a Thursday, recovery from addictions to anger and violence, to handle fear and pain. One of our most violent kids currently works at a correctional facility, and his wife attended John Jay College, currently a substance abuse counselor, and they're still together to this day.
They met at Orpheus.
they met there. Friday, recovery as children of chemically dependent families. Several teens spoke on this topic, for it was always intense, and a majority of us would cry during this because this was the only time we were able to speak out on this situation without being judged, without being afraid of being taken away from what we know. And Saturday, recovery from addictions to misusing money, clothes, and jewelry. Teenagers would speak on how they sold drugs to survive and became addicted to acquiring the legal money. Of course, they grew up following what they seen and what they were always around. This was a safe society for us to acknowledge our addictions and find supportive rehabilitation. I'm currently in my second cycle at Boricua College, working towards my Bachelor's of Science in Human Services. I'm very grateful for having met Joyce and been a part of ATA, so much so that I would love to introduce and assist other underprivileged kids, teenagers especially, with these same issues. Thank you.
One of the things that I saw the kids do is kids, when they do not have the parents and community support and even understanding, because so much of what happened to them, if they told anybody, one of the boys said, if my mother had cancer, I could ask for help. If I ask for help, she goes to jail and I go to a group home, okay? They help each other. So the FBI has called this gangs, super predators, okay? What I saw were as a group of extremely talented, wonderful kids who had great needs, and they needed to band together. To this day, they still talk about being a member of the How Club, right? To this day. Let me tell you what How Club stands for. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And it was the name of our discotheque. And the way we got them to participate in ATA was they had to go to ATA meetings before they could go to the dance, okay? But it was very important when they'd gotten in touch with some very serious feelings and issues that they had the art and the dance and the expression, which is extremely healing. I just wanted to add that. Louis is going to talk to us about being imprisoned as a youth and his life today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Louis. Thank you for having me. Where do I start? Okay. Excuse me, this is my first time doing this, okay? So anyway, I grew up in Harlem, Spanish Harlem to be exact. And I grew up in a household that was, I'm not gonna say unstable, but yeah, unstable. I had my mother, it was 4 of us, it was 4 kids, and I had my stepdad. However, though he was there, I felt as if he wasn't there. You know, he was my younger brother's father, and you know, you could tell the difference when it comes to love. You know, he picks him up, throws him in the air, kisses him, and I just get a pat on my head. So I always said that my mother was my mother and my father, though I respected him. In saying that, you know, I felt as if I had no guidance. I mean, my mother, I say she's my mother and my father, but I mean, really, can she really be my father? So, you know, the only thing I know is what my cousins, brother, uncles, and everyone else around me is doing, which is selling drugs. You know, I could remember at a time where I was around 12 years old. I was in junior high school, and I was made fun of because of what I was wearing, while everybody else had name brand, you know, and what was in style. So I felt as if, you know, in order to fit in, this is what I had to do. This is exactly what I did. So around 1993, I met my wife, and she ended up getting pregnant. We had a son. He was he was 2 months old. Well, when he was born, I was 16 years old. So now I drop out of school, and I feel as if I have a family to support now. So now I really get into selling drugs. But now, not only do I get into selling drugs, but I'm trying to escape from my reality. So I start smoking marijuana. And, that led to a whole bunch of other things, that I don't want to really get into. But one of the main things that it led to was me getting incarcerated. Actually, at the age of 17, my son was only 3 months old, and I ended up in prison for selling drugs. I had a criminal sale of a controlled substance in the 1st degree, 2nd degree, and 3rd degree. It was a 5-count indictment. And, I just losing my train of thought here. Thank you. Just collect my thoughts here. Okay, so I start, I get into this. Anyway, I get incarcerated, and it was 4 of us. I had 3 co-defendants. One of them happened to be my brother, and each and every one of them were repeat offenders. One was actually a predicate offender. Okay, and again, I was 17. They were all older than me. I was the youngest. I ended up with a 7 1/2 to life bid. And while everyone else got a 1 to 3, a 3 to 6, and a 4 1/2 to 9. The predicate offender got the 4 1/2 to 9. I couldn't make sense of that, but it is what it is. I went to prison. I copped a plea without waiving my right to appeal. So, I copped a plea, I went upstate, and I appealed. I lost my appeal. I'm not gonna get into that either, but when I lost my appeal, I felt like I lost everything. I lost all my hope. I lost everything. I felt like I lost everything. I thought I was never gonna come home. And what really didn't make sense to me was this was my first offense, my first blemish with the law. Like, I couldn't understand it. And then what made it worse was that the very first prison they sent me to after Rikers Island was Great Meadows, which everyone knows is also known as a gladiator school. So can you imagine being 18 years old, 17, 18 years old in Great Meadows, also known as the gladiator school of Comstock? I was afraid. I mean, here I am I'm walking by and I'm looking at other inmates, and everyone has a tag with their number on it. And I'm seeing 53, someone's been down since 53, I couldn't understand this. I'm 17 years old, I probably weighed 130 pounds. So yes, I was terrified. But, I held my own. And I couldn't understand how I was thrown into a place so violent. My first day there was a riot in a yard. About 20 people got stabbed. So I just couldn't make sense of it, And I couldn't make sense of not only of the situation the situation I was put in, but I couldn't make sense of how no one was really helping me. Like, no one. No one was helping me. I wish I had someone like the Reverend Joyce Hartwell around my area. Maybe that would have saved me. But unfortunately, I didn't have someone like Miss Joyce around my area. So, I was afraid. It broke me down. I lost my manhood. I lost my dignity. I lost my family. I lost everything, and I took responsibility for what I did. Talking about re-entry, out the 7 1/2, I did 6 1/2, and I came home. I've been home for 12 years now, and that's the only success I can actually say that I have, is that I've been home for 12 years without going back to prison. Because thank you. I have more success besides that, meaning we shared my first son. He's 18 years old. Yes, he did graduate high school. And I invest all my time into him because the truth is that it's hard for me to find a job. No matter what I do, I'm well-mannered, respectful. I graduated from college. I got an associate's in human services. I graduated with honors. You know, I made the dean's list. I missed my presidential scholar by .04 points. You know, so I invest my time in my kids. You know, I want to break a cycle. My father was in jail. I went to jail. You know, I refuse to let my son go to jail. So since I'm having such a hard time finding a job, then what else can I do? I invest my time in my kids. You know, and my son, again, he's 18. He graduated high school. Right now, he works for 40 Acres and a Mule with Spike Lee. He interns for him. You know, so I could say, you know, I'll take some credit for that. You know, not all of it because, you know, he had to do the work in school, you know, not me. And, you know, I really wish, man, that society would stop what some call branding. You know, as I'm a felon, so I'm branded as a felon. You know, I go to a job interview. Yeah, that little thing that says, you know, have you ever been convicted of a felony? That holds a lot of weight. It doesn't matter what you've been convicted of. You know, it could have been a speeding ticket and you got a felony for that. Just because it says felony, it doesn't matter. You know, they don't even run a background check on you. You automatically don't get the job. You'll be lucky if the company doesn't run a background check on you and just hires you. You know, I've held pretty good jobs. All of them because someone I knew was able to say, look, come in and I'm going to help you. You know, however, those jobs were seasonal, temp, or unfortunately, I came at the end of it and end up getting laid off. So in the 12 years that I've been home, I haven't been stable as far as work. They have never been stable. However, I don't give up. I don't give up, you know, and I really wish that there was more people like Joyce around, and you guys, because I tell you what, this weekend has been very interesting, very informative, and I really appreciate what everyone does, especially, I'm not sure if the team is here that was going to Montgregor. I mean, what they do, they volunteer their time, like, you know, that is amazing, you know, it's amazing that there are people out there who really care. You know, but I just wish that everyone did care. You know, give someone a second shot. You know, I feel as I deserve it. I'm just being home for 12 years and not going back to prison proves that, you know, though I'm struggling, I'm able to commit. And I'm committed to my family and my wife and my kids. Thank you. And with that, you know, I don't really want to take up too much time. I just wanted you to know a little bit about me, my story, and, you know, re-entry into society, man. It's you know, for someone like, take Jeff, you know, I applaud you, you know, for what you do too. You know, I ain't mentioned you. I really do applaud what you do. See, someone like Jeff, you know, I believe, though he still had a hard time adjusting when he came home, at the end of the day, if he stopped doing what he did, and he applied for a job, he doesn't have to check that box. You understand? So, I mean, he would be better off than me. Someone like Robert Langoni, I'm sorry if I'm, you know, mispronouncing his name, that's amazing what he did. You know, but the truth is, I mean, if you really want to know the truth, and I don't mean to offend anyone, he stood up here and he said that he opened up doors. No, he didn't. You know, you're not going to see that again. You know, and if you do, I highly doubt if it's a black man or a Spanish man that they're allowed to practice law. And that's the truth. You know, and I just wish that, you know, some people would stop labeling us and branding us and give us a second shot. You know, give me a shot and then decide if I'm worth that shot or not. You know, don't just judge me because I was convicted. Yes, I was convicted. But I took responsibility. Not only did I take responsibility, but I also did my time. And not only did I do my time, but I came home on my merit board, which is good time. You know, so that alone says a lot. I was unfortunate to not have college. When I went up in '95. That was when they cut that program, the college program. So I just missed out. So all those years I did, the only thing I came home with was a GED. A GED. So now think about this. 17 years old, no work experience, a GED in prison. I'm coming home. The only thing, and this is the God honest truth, I got no help from nobody, not the state, city, no one. The only help that I got was them telling me, look, go to this program called America Works. America Works is a resume workshop. What am I going to put on my resume? I have no experience. You know, so where does my help come from? The Lord. That's it. You know, so, I mean, you know, I just wish that people would open up their eyes, man, see that we're not animals. Yeah, we did commit crimes and, you know, some wrongly convicted, some not. You know, but that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, that really does not matter. Give me a shot. That's all I ask for. Give me a shot. You know, and I'm not saying anyone specifically. I'm just saying, give me a shot, you know, like, feel me, you know, like, understand me. I was a kid. I was naive. You know, I was doing the norm in my neighborhood, which was, again, my cousins, brothers, uncles, aunts, everybody was either using drugs or selling drugs. I had no father. My stepfather, again, wasn't my father, so it's not like I could even go to him for advice. You know, because we really didn't even conversate. You know, yeah, I could go to my mother, but who's gonna go to their mother like, Mom? You know, I don't want to get into specifics, but you know, nobody really wants to go to their mom like, Mom, you know, I want to do this or I want to do that. You know, and have her talk me out of it. I could do that with a dad. Unfortunately, I can't because I never had that in my life. But that's really it. You know. Thank you for hearing me.
I just want to add another piece of information because the judge who was supposed to do this workshop is trying to abolish youth being put in adult prisons. And Commissioner Gladys Carrion introduced a program that she wanted to get initiated in New York State. She wanted to close all the youth facilities, not have teenagers put in adult prisons, and do a project called Communities That Care, the Missouri model. And it was establishing homes with intensive staff. And she told, I was at the meeting when she introduced it to upstate civil service workers. None of them liked it. She said, and at that time there was a better budget with the state, she said, I'll educate you people so you who are COs in the youth prisons can go back to school and learn how to counsel and really help kids. Nobody seemed to like the idea, but I will say that Governor Cuomo has kept her as the youth commissioner. What he's planning and where her ideas would go, but she really was quite a courageous person in talking and standing up for the youth in New York State. Okay, next is Danielle Williams, and I'm going to move now to the Capital Region because I came up here 12 years ago, and I want to give you some statistics about Albany, New York. And I just got these. These are hot off the press. We have under supervision by the county in Albany, 2,700 people. A third of those are now sex offenders. But let me tell you what the majority of the sex offender problem is. I had been warned ahead of time by Senator Valmont Montgomery that this was coming down the pike. It's teenage kids who are 18 who are having sex with kids who are maybe 15. They don't understand. Nobody's gone out. It's like Judge Breslin, who's the chief judge in Albany, said to me when a group of us met with him. He said, what's the use of having a law like the Rockefeller drug laws when the kids never even heard of it until after they get arrested and then they're charged? And then people explain to them what the Rockefeller drug law is. So the idea of youth who are having sex with each other and the laws in regard to that, they don't have a clue. But these kids will be labeled for the rest of their life as a sex offender. We have 650 people returning from state prison in Albany. So we're talking now about 3,000, couple of hundred people under supervision in Albany. For me, coming from New York City and running the program I did for 25 years, I saw a lot. And I saw a lot of neighborhoods. But I've never seen anything, and this is the state capital, this is what gets me. I've never seen anything as contained and neglected as the economically challenged communities in Albany, New York. I was amazed. And at one point, the FBI came in, and this police chief and our mayor, they all got together and said, we'll get them, we'll call them gangs. They took these kids who grew up next to each other in isolated neighborhoods, okay, where they had no place to go except talk to each other, and they were neighbors. They said they were an illegal organization in junior high school and charged them with the RICO Act. And we put 140 young black men in prison in the last couple of years under the RICO Act in the capital of New York City. And these are kids who had nothing, didn't even understand. Some of them were already doing time. They were revisited by the FBI and saying, if you don't cop to this, we're going to charge you with 30 to life. And that was the charge. You would get 30 to life. In the beginning, nobody, and I was working with some of the mothers and the grandmothers, because I was just amazed at this. I just didn't believe what was happening. And the mothers and the grandmothers, we worked together and we did a testimony which was very moving. I really should have brought that. But they talked about their neighborhoods, that they didn't even have mailboxes, no food stores, no community center, no transportation. In my neighborhood, if you live in West Hill and you don't have a car, and many people don't have a car, there's hardly transportation. You're just contained in Never Never Land. Okay, and this is what came out of it. We're going to hand out to you a recent survey that was done by the Legal Action Center, Alice Green, on the racial disparity in sentencing in Albany, New York, and also on the state of youth in Albany, New York. Now, these are not for you to read now. You can take it home. Also, we're going to do an excerpt of the new Jim Crow, because you've heard a lot about it. So here's a book review on the new Jim Crow. Can you hand that out? No, not you. You wait. And Danielle, who grew up in Albany, who raises her children in Albany, she is going to tell you about the experience of the community in Albany, New York. Danielle.
Hi, everyone. I'm a little nervous for my first time even attending something like this. I really want to say thank you to Frank, because without you, this probably wouldn't be possible for me. It's a wonderful experience. Thank you. I want to say I'm here as a mother, not only to my children, but to all the kids that grew up in my community. And it's just so sad. As they grew up, the things we've seen together, me and the kids and their families, between the drug addiction, the violence. To give you an example, I seen one young girl at a phone trying to call for help. She had blood on her socks, blood on her T-shirt. Her throat was ripped from ear to ear, and she had stab marks in her chest. It was from her mother's boyfriend, who was addicted to crack. He had went to the house and robbed them for a VCR. And as I was holding her throat together, he ran past us with the VCR, and he had the bloody shirt on him. And the cops caught him running still with the VCR because he was so badly addicted to crack. Another example that I want to tell you about, which I already told you the other day, is about a young man named L.I. Meek Rouse. If you Google him, you'll hear his story. Very good young man. He came to my job and wanted a pistol permit. He was a security guard at one time. He worked at the nursing home, and so many people loved him. Unfortunately, he was not going to be able to get a pistol permit to carry a gun. His reason for wanting a gun was to protect himself. He said the streets were so dangerous, he couldn't even walk the streets. He said, you don't understand the way that the streets are. And I said, you don't need a gun, because if you get one, you're going to end up in jail, or you're going to end up hurting somebody. He said, but you don't understand how dangerous it is. Unfortunately, about a year later, he was shot to death twice in the back of his head. We don't know why yet. There's rumors that it may have been a robbery. We're not sure. But he was such a good kid. The problems I'm seeing in the community, which is falling apart, I'm seeing families fighting with families, families falling apart, drug-addicted parents leaving their children to raise themselves because they're not capable of, I guess, getting their own senses together because they're so addicted to these chemicals, which are a health problem. And I don't understand how the system can criminalize a health issue, but yet they're willing to lock them up and make money off of them by putting them in prison. I don't understand sometimes when I watch the media and I see how kids from affluent neighborhoods and the kids from our poor neighborhoods have two different justices because of the color of their skin. I don't understand how sometimes when our kids get caught with the same crime, those kids don't even see the judges. They don't even see the court system. Our kids are automatically handed to a public defender because they can't afford a lawyer, and a public defender can be standing right there. And I've seen this personally. He didn't know the kid's name until he opened up the file, and he had a plea deal ready for him right that same time. And I'm like, what type of a defense is that? I hear from the kids regularly because I'm always around. I've done many basketball tournaments over my years. The kids know me through my son, who was currently incarcerated, first-time offense, 25 years. No record. Little L had no record. He just wanted to survive the streets. A lot of kids are carrying guns. And I say to you, it's not just kids that are bad kids trying to defend themselves. It's good kids carrying guns, too. But yet, when the system sees them, you're going to do 8 years whether you're carrying a gun, you shouldn't have one. But they don't live where we live. They don't see the dangers that these kids go through. They don't see people getting their heads cracked open, their skulls cracked open over fights. I've seen a murder. I've seen a kid get shot to death because he brought a girl home and their boyfriend didn't like it. So he just laid there crying, help me, help me, help me. And he died. They don't see this. You probably wouldn't even want to walk through my neighborhoods. Some people will want to live there. But some people want to stay. Some people want to make a change. And you guys, I feel, want to make a change. I think prison system is barbaric. I know there has to be a solution for the crimes, but I just think caging people as animals, putting them in the hole, there's no therapy. They're going to act out sooner or later. They miss their families. They miss their homes. Everybody is not what you would believe to be what they might label people as a savage. I don't know what they label them as, but they lock them up like one. I don't know what the answer is, but I do feel like there needs to be change. And I think they should hit them before they get to the courts, before they get to the prisons. We need some community programs. We need addiction programs, effective, because right now I see them treating crack-addicted individuals with methadone. And now they've got another drug that they treat people for methadone, and it's still addiction. Each drug is an addiction. Get the people off the drugs. Get the guns out of our communities. Hit the NRA up if you have to, because I think somebody's got to take. These guns are coming from somewhere, and these kids are getting too much access. The poison is killing our community. Our community is dying. We need help. People say you should take your own community. You should take hold of your own community. I'm one person. I need a little help. I really do. But I thank you because I feel like you're a blessing, and you might be able to help. That's all I got to say.
I would like to add that Danielle grew up on Orange Street. I'm on Orange Street, a few houses from where she grew up. That's where my church is, and I have a center there. And Father Reddy's church is right on the corner, so we're there, right? I just wanted to point out on the Addicted Teen Anonymous program, if you look at the steps, the 8th and 9th step where it says you make a list of everybody you've harmed and then you make amends to them, that is also restorative justice. So the restorative justice program, if you have the 12 steps, if every church would open their doors, or synagogue, or community center, and have an ATA meeting, and have kids come, you could have mentors, you could refer them to these other programs, but you have an ongoing support system of the kids helping each other and understanding each other. And because they don't have anybody, they really don't. Dr. Chang. And Dr. Chang has written a book on immigration, and we'll talk about the problems of immigration in the justice system.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Reverend Hartwell. I just don't know if I should start with immigration, because as Reverend Joyce Hartwell said, in addition to. So I'll do the prisons and I'll do immigration, but it will be in addition to whatever I heard a while ago. It's so many things that's heart-rending to me and so real. When Mr. Sotomayor spoke, it rang a bell that was just so real. And I said to myself, okay, they transferred you to Green Meadow and that facility, and I said, whoa, far away from your socio-cultural environment, far away from your friends and families. And I said to myself, did they have any legal representation for this young man? Being a teacher in the Schenectady School District and coming from a culture where children are children in Jamaica, children are children. I see children, excuse me, Senora, I want to go to my parole officer. I said, what parole officer 13? Where do you get that? What's that? You need time to play and become a child. Be a child. What are you talking about, parole officer? And these poor kids, they're so excited about their parole officer. I go, wow, where am I living, God? Parole officer at 13, then a little girl comes to say, Senora, they have a baby prison in Albany County, baby county. I said, Nikisha, you must be out of your mind. They call it a baby county. Got to be a big business. Prison got to be a big business here. Got to be a big multi-billion-dollar business like illegal immigration. And here is the book. I came here to America, the exported hype. When people get here, let me explain to everybody. When people get here, they don't just get here because America is fantastic. They get here for every other reasons. They get here because right now bombs are being dropped on people in their homes. And grandma is running from Pakistan to Afghanistan to Liberia to England to whatever to get here. They just don't pack up and get here. They get here for many reasons. Brain drain. I got here because of brain drain. President Nixon was in Jamaica and Kingston burned in 1976 because Michael Manley was no longer going to play a game with the Reagan administration. And he wanted that political party out. So Kingston burned. There was a lot of things, and a lot of people left the island, left their swimming pools, left their big houses, their dogs, their sick grandma, and ran to Florida, Canada, England, wherever they could find places. They're not just coming here because America is a bed of roses, which is not. It is not a bed of roses, because I experienced it. I came here as a Spanish teacher. I was the head of a Spanish department in Jamaica. And during all this crisis, my brother was here. And during the crisis, I came here thinking, okay, I could become a lawyer like Norman Manley with all my credentials. But when I got here, I realized without a green card, I was regulated for 6 years as a living maid. I can take you to all the homes in Rumson, all the homes in West Caldwell. I live beside President Nixon in Upper Sagle River. I can tell you all the beautiful suburbs where I cleaned, walked the dogs, dressed the cat, wiped the puss mouth, get the rats out, clean everything. Was ridiculed. ridiculed as the head of a Spanish department, call all names, stand by the pool in the heat of the sun with the towel over my, I can laugh now, with the towel over my shoulder, waiting for them to frolic in the pool. Then they came out, I had to dry the dogs off, and then go for the lemonade and stand there like a clown in my white uniform. So this is the book. The book, The Mask is Off. Furthermore, we're saying we don't want illegal immigrants here. Lie, we want them. You want them. So much America. Stop playing games. So all the rhetoric that they're going on with. The first thing, that illegal immigrants pay a lot of taxes. You research that. When they get here, they buy what is called their Social Security card. Nobody monitors them. They married and get green card marriages. Nobody. It's after 9/11 America started to monitor illegal immigrants, really. When I came here, there was nothing like that. You could easily buy your Social Security card and you pay into taxes, but you would never get that taxes back. It goes towards the pension of legal immigrants. They're talking about school children getting here and using your school system. Lie. The first thing, immigrants who run away or who left their country, they always leave their children behind. You can ask Mayor Bloomberg. I just got a letter from him 2 weeks ago, I think 2 days ago, with the same thing. He just got a copy of the book. And he was saying to me the same thing. No, they do not. In New York City, where he is, they do not use the system. Their children are left behind. The majority of illegal immigrants don't take their children here until they're college. So they're making up all these stories about illegal immigrants are a burden to taxpayer. They're taking away legal immigrants. Let me ask, how many of you would walk dogs? How many of you would clean people's floor when they tell you to get down? How many of you would pick their strawberries for $2 a year? Would you? No. Put your hand down. You would not. How many of you would no, how many of you would no, it's true. How many of you would live in huts by the riverside? And look at this. My sister is a nurse in Texas, and she said, Camille, to my niece, when these Mexicans get here, they're all valedictorians, their children. Mr. Gonzalez, who was President Bush attorney, he was an immigrant farm worker, his dad, but he would wake up after he picked the vegetables with dad and go to school and become a lawyer. It's not easy, because the first thing you get here with all your credentials, America said, no, you're third world, we're regulating you, you have an accent. This thing about accent. What do you know about accent, people with accent? You don't know squat. You don't know anything about people. You have doctors, lawyers from Chile, Argentina, Russia, but they have a language barrier, and because they do, you think they're silly. No, come on, let's get away with this ignorance now. I can help you to get around it. You gotta wake up. You're in a box, and that's why we're so lonely egotists, because we sit in our, wherever we are, neighborhoods, which I don't have in Jamaica. We live anywhere amongst everybody. You see Chinese, Indian, Syrian, black, white going to my funeral if I die. You just don't see black folks. I was stunned when I got here. I said, neighborhoods? What's neighborhood? This man said, I was walking through Loudonville, and this man said he saw 2 black women walking through Loudonville, and his heart was going like that at the church. And I said, it was Sister Glassglow and myself. Why were you so frightened? Everything in Mississippi come back to me, how I used to run with my children. I said, that's Mississippi. I'm going to walk through Loudonville. Where I'm from, there's no Mississippi, so I'm going to walk right there. But I'm not saying that I'm saying, putting down that there's Mississippi. But he was so frightened, and I was frightened too, because it was a culture shock, this neighborhood thing, that you can't walk anywhere, you can't be seen here, everybody looking like that. And, oh, she has an accent. And what? You do have an accent here too. Texas says, now we ain't go nowhere. You all have your accents drooling like, I can't hear some of these politicians when they talk. They all have accents, so please forget about that part, because you all have accents. So anyway, I'm saying illegal immigrants who get here, they contribute more. It's a fuel for the economy. They contribute a lot of money to the infrastructure of America here. For instance, when I was a living maid, the first thing that struck me, and I said to my brother, I said, why can't I live with you and live in and work outside? He said, if immigration catches me, then he'll be charged for harboring an illegal immigrant. So I said, how come I could go and work in a rich woman's house and immigration don't say she's harboring me? Why is she not being molested? And why is this lady could say to me, if I don't obey her, because I had to be so obedient, I couldn't look right, fear was killing me. I don't know how I'm standing here today like Mr. Sotomayor. I'm saying that she could easily threaten me if I didn't wash and clean and she would make, when they use you, they would make jobs and create new jobs. You'll be ironing. And they said you're to walk the dog, and you leave the ironing, and the pot needs to be looked at, and the children needs to pick up. And they just add in work, and the exploitation, and the abuse. Oh, Lord, how did I get over that? It must be you. Yes. And she would threaten me and other people, other ladies that I know, that she would call immigration. And then I said, you would call immigration to deport us. What would immigration say to you for hiring me? So these are the little loopholes that they get through, not little, many loopholes that they do with illegal immigrants. They work you to death for peanuts. They owe you money and you cannot ask them for it. I could not go back and ask. They would say, I'm going to send my boyfriend to beat the crap out of you. And you would have to stay there in their cold basements. And the children are so rude and ridicule you. I can take every one of you to the homes right now to show you where I worked in Jersey and all over this fabulous country. Yes. So this is what I'm saying, that we need illegal immigrants here, and we are just trying to scare like they're the boogeymen. They're not. We need them as meat packers, in our factories, construction workers. But we think that we can beat them to death and throw them in a dump because nobody hears. And even the lawyers. My lawyer, I'm going to give you a story about him. I think he's right down there in Brooklyn. When I realized that I could be, with all these threats, fear and anticipation, nervousness almost killed poor me. So I went to see this lawyer, and he charged me $3,000 up front. My brother had already filed the papers, and he charged me $3,000. And I paid him, and when I went back to him, he was sexually harassing me like he think he could do anything with you because you have nowhere to turn to. So he didn't really do anything with me, but he would say the nastiest of things to me when he sees me. And I know he wouldn't do that to his client. He would be the uppity neighborhood lawyer in Manhattan. But with illegals, he could be as low as he is because he was wearing his mask. That's why the book is The Mask is Off. So anyway, when I went back to him, he told me that I knew that my green card should be ready now because it was almost 6 years my brother had filed. And when I went back to him, he said I needed another $2,500 because my green card wouldn't be coming in for the next 4 years. It was my sister who called me from Jamaica. The very year he told me I needed 4 more years for my green card, my sister called me the very year and said, your medical and green card at the Kingston Embassy, in American Embassy in Kingston. And I know my papers are still sitting in that rascal's desk in some drawer there. If I should go to his office now and say I've got my green card over 12 years now, I know my file is still sitting there, waiting for me to come back. So it's the exploitation. The buses were in league. They would add new routes, or routes as you call it here, whatever, to transport undocumented maids into like Greenwich, Connecticut, into those Cape Cod areas. They would add it, the bus regular route. So everybody is making millions off illegal. There's so many scams. I even read about President Obama giving the Hispanics or the people who are here time from 16 to 30. But a lot of people already jumped on the scam to milk them out of money by telling, come to me, you can get A, B, and C. There's a lot of scams going on. But thank God I lived it, I saw it, and they can't tell me anything. By the way, President Obama has one of this book. So he should be reading it and getting it out to everybody. And this is coming from the horse's mouth. I lived it and I experienced it. So if you want a copy, Father Reddy can give out some flyers. Oh, he did. But I want to go back and I want just to say that illegal immigration, you need to start thinking and not being gullible about this immigration thing, illegal immigration. It's the lifeblood of America. It's what fuels Americans' economy, like the prison. So I'm going to go over to the prison because what Mr. Sotomayor said to me had really impacted me. And I could see the injustice because he was transferred to a facility far away from families, a place so violent for a young man, far away, less populated area. He didn't see anybody who spoke Spanish or could say anything. They isolated him. That's what they do. Isolate them, bring them up into some, I don't know, into some wilderness where they can't see anybody. I know I have a detective friend and a sheriff friend, but he is old and retired now. And he told me that in a facility upstate, they would beat these young men and women so hard, and then they would go to the infirmary and they would patch them back up. That's what he told me. Okay, so I understand how these young men or women are held in isolated jails. Some are beyond the reach of legal representation. I don't know if they had said to Mr. Sotomayor, you know you're entitled to a lawyer. Some lawyers have to fly in from so far to come and get to their clients. This is very sad. Even private phone calls, some of these detainees are not allowed to talk with their lawyers. And so it's hard to track those in custody. The lucky ones might have a hearing and they struggle to get help, and you might have some pro bono agencies. But overall, it's just, time is up. So I'm just going to say we need to read, and we don't need to listen to others. We got to read and understand, and don't let anybody put fear into you. And whatever you can do to help felons transition back into society, we need to do that. Father Reddy has a program going at the church, so I'm going to turn it over to him. And when these young people speak, they're speaking from the heart, because only those who have felt something similar knows it. So we all have to understand that they're just not making a story. They're speaking from their experiences. Thank you.
Very quickly, before I introduce Father Reddy, I spoke to the people on the Reentry Task Force in New York State before I came up, and I said, what's happening in reentry? And the bottom line for everybody was that if you don't have real estate and a physical presence where you can create community like the Fortune Society or like we had, it's very hard. If you can create community, but even if you have a program, that program needs resources, and employment being the biggest. I would like to hand out to everybody the piece that was done by the Reentry Task Force, the government workers. We, the community on the task force, didn't agree with this. One of the worst terms you have in here is they referred to people as criminogenic. We said, what's that? But this was the hot off the press what DCJS gave to Cuomo as a result of the reentry task forces. So I'm going to pass that out for you. You can look at it later on. Father Reddy. And again, Father Reddy wants to create community so that there'll be a place in the community that can support people in reentry.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you. And after all of that, I've come to the end of the last, and then hopefully I can say something. But I just want to say a word of thank you to all the previous speakers. It was good to hear persons speaking in this way. I'm speaking more from perspective as the vicar of a church, Grace and Holy Innocents, right there at Clinton and Robin in Arbor Hill. And groups that are held at the church and people come from is right in that locality. And the locality speaks to the needs that are in the society, and we try to respond as a church. Well, let me say a couple of things about myself. I'm from Jamaica originally, and have been doing this kind of work in different parts in Jamaica and in England and here. And one of the things I did was a pre-release program many years ago in which we had young men who were serving the last 18 months of their sentence in a pre-release program. So that young men like this who just spoke, we could take in and working in conjunction with organizations in community and industry, we were able to find them jobs where they could work. We took 50% of what they earned from them and saved it. And at the end of those 18 months, we gave them back all that money in lump sum. What it did is that over a 10-year period, we had about 2% worth of recidivism. Because every man who goes home could go and see his wife or his child. He could take money with him in his pocket. He could buy a beer and buy dinner and eat and have something left. He didn't have to rob anyone or steal from anyone, so he could just go home. We did that successfully. People from different countries came to see that program when I did it in Jamaica. And here I work as chaplain for Coxsackie Correctional with offenders too. And I see young men this age group who are in jail. But my thing is about really this word re-entry, which is so important. Offenders who have been working with do go home from time to time. And sometimes, while re-entry is a wonderful thing, and I support the program entirely, we may not look at it as carefully as we should, because it speaks about from the particular to the general. When someone returns home, he goes back to his community in most instances. He goes back to his family. And sometimes the family remembers that person mostly from the crime which they committed. And although they have spent 10 years with us in corrections, and we have worked with them, we believe that their lives are better. When that man returns home, again, he still do have that responsibility to reassure his family, to reassure his community that he is a changed person. You think that's easy? When he goes home, and they said, okay, you can have a room in the house. And if tonight he is thirsty and want to get a drink from the fridge, he goes in to take a drink, and somebody says, are you okay? Because everybody, in a sense, is still watching. They're not too sure yet if he's back to normal, if they can still trust him. And the ex-offender has to deal with this. He has to adjust to the suspicion from home, the suspicion in community. So reentry is a good thing, but it needs a lot of work with the community, with the families, with the organizations, the churches. And although we are in that sphere, reaching out to churches, But who is helping a mother to understand what has happened to her son after 10 years away? Who is helping a wife to understand what has happened to her son, her husband, for the last 5 years? And so, in church communities where people look after these people, they see the needs that confront them. And the young man spoke about a job, getting a job. When you have to fill the application out, you have to say whether or not you have a felon, and then that automatically qualifies you or disqualifies you. So that piece needs to be revisited with the hope of how do we give these young men a future? Because we have a couple choices. Either to give them a future, or we just leave them as they are to keep on going back. When I look at the men in the facilities from time to time, I see them more as what they can become. I was visiting with my family recently, and I visited my son, take me to meet with his boss. And his boss is a senior executive, and he was just telling me, he said, he asked me what I did, so I shared with him. And he said, maybe I should not be sitting here, I should be in jail. He said, when I have contemplated my life, I should have been in jail. I could have been in jail. But somewhere along the road, somebody helped him along. And as a consequence, he now manages a big company and is doing well. One of the persons I like to think about is the late Carlton Alexander. If you look in some stories, you see a product called Grace Kennedy. He's a Jamaican man. And he was one of my benefactors, that when I needed help for young men, I could call the phone and says, I need to talk to you. He says, come on up. As a result of that man, I was able to put many, many young people in job in the city of Kingston. We need benefactors like that today in this upstate New York, in New York City, who will reach out to young people and give them a chance. If we don't give them a chance, what's going to happen to them? There must be benefactors who will say, okay, we can invest some money. There are enough companies in this state making enough money. They can carve out $50,000 a year to help these kind of persons who are trying, who are desperately trying to make life worthwhile. None of us will be successful, nor none of us could have been successful unless somebody reached out to us and touched us along the way. It's my experience that we do need to have that kind of support. In my community where the church is, it's not easy to put families together who have been so disintegrated. And as you seek to pastor people in those areas, you have the factor of lack of trust, the factor of the disintegration of the family, the factors of the missing fathers, and the girls growing without any sense of love from their dads and never know who they are. And the situation goes on. We as a church right now, we're trying to do some more programs such as a music program to teach young people even 2 hours a week for free to come and be a part, to learn something. Because when I look at the people in the community, the wonderful gifts that they have, if we just give them a chance to become themselves, to be, a chance to just lift themselves up. And sometimes, unfortunately, we are inclined to say, I have a car, I have a home, I have money in the bank, I'm good. And everybody else take a jump somewhere else. No. We need to create communities. In the very early days of parole, it used to be that the neighborhood became the parole unit. because everybody knew everybody and watched one another, and the young man never goes back to jail because everybody stood up for that person. What's happened to us? What's happened to us? When are we going to get back to that place where we can really love each other as people? If we begin to do that, we are going to change this place and make it better. I know we can. I pray that we will. And I'm looking for the days when we can say, yeah, we have done it. Thank you. God bless you.
So I said before, I think this is such an important conference for upstate New York. According to the Commissioner of Corrections, Brian Fisher, 50% of the people now filling up the prisons are from upstate New York, no longer from New York City. And we have not too much communication on these subjects. This has been a very special conference. Now, does anybody have a question or a comment before we end? Okay, that's it. Thank you.